Buenos dias, thank you. Buenos dias, bon dia. Hello, good morning everyone. How are you feeling today? Woo! Woo! Anita is awake.
Be afraid.
I hope you all had a good night last night, relaxing, feeling rested. Anyone learn any interesting Spanish while we're here? Yes, Padma. What did you learn? Cerveza.
Any other words?
Hola. Gracias. Very important. Very important. Anything else? No.
Okay,
Christina.
well, we're going to learn this. We're going to give you a Spanish word that's really important here in Cartagena, and the word is chévere. Who knows what chévere means? Chévere. It's awesome. It's cool. So when you like a presentation, uy, qué presentación tan chévere. Chévere. When you're on the street, you see something you like the food, chévere. Very common here on the coast. Let's hear it, everybody. Chévere. Chévere. Awesome. So that's our word of the day. Okay, so let's go over just a few pieces of housekeeping. First of all, we got your feedback on the temperature, so we think it's a little bit warmer in here. Just let any of us know if it's still not quite right. Also, we want to bring your attention to the whiteboard, which is awesome. People have been really using it and making connections. If you wrote something, be sure to go back and take a look if somebody's responded and make a connection. For anybody that wasn't here yesterday, perhaps, or just as a reminder, that if there's any kind of an emergency, the exit is the same way that you came in. The meeting point is just outside of here, and there are sets of bathrooms outside of those doors. And down this hallway, which is where we get to lunch and coffee breaks in the breakout sessions. And then the other thing I want to say is about activities, that you know that today you're free, you have the night off. And there's a list of activities. These are just possibilities. You're free to do whatever you'd like. But maybe if anybody is planning on doing one of these activities or anything else, think about putting a note on the board and asking who else might want to join you. What am I missing on logistics, Chris?
Presentations, emails.
Oh yeah, everybody's asking about the materials from yesterday. Absolutely, you're going to get all the presentations. And also, there's been YBI network team members taking notes at the sessions. So we're going to pull out just kind of the key outputs from each of those discussions, and you'll get those later next week.
And the daily summary email as well. We're sending out a daily summary. So what has been happening during the day. Is everyone getting that email in their inbox? No? No, raise your hand if you're not getting the email. Okay, so check your junk mail, because a lot of them are going into there. If it's still not coming through, then speak to Catalin down at the front, and he'll add you to the list.
Okay, I think that's the logistics.
So yesterday, lots of great content, very big picture, forward-looking, future-looking. Out of the feedback from yesterday, you can see some of the big themes that you guys pulled together. Design, human-centered design came through very strongly. A lot of people made comments about failure, how important it is to embrace failure and use it, learn from it. Innovations up their blockchain business. So yeah, a lot of big picture learning yesterday. Today, we're looking to progress. We are looking much more personal and between us. And to talk about that, to introduce our next key speaker is Joe. So I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Yeah, I wanted to take this moment to introduce our keynote today. I know a lot of us go to a lot of conferences. And do you have that moment when you're in the audience and somebody starts to talk and you think, oh my God, they're saying exactly what I think, but in a much better, clearer, more articulate, more creative, more engaging way. Very lucky, back in October, I was at a conference in the States talking about mentoring like we do in the network with some of the people here today. Had the pleasure of seeing our keynote speaker here today. And when we sat down 9 months ago to start planning this, I knew we had to weave him into this. because Chad is all about connection. And not just that icebreaker connection, but that real how and why of connection. And we're going to start looking at some of that today with him. And you'll have heard yesterday Anita saying, connection is at the heart of the YBI network. And Lakshmi sharing that unless we harness that connection, we can't take that next big step. This is our opportunity. Our key partners, Accenture and IDB, so Heidi and Maritza, said similar things about the importance of partnerships to really deliver what we do. And if anyone was in the Tisha Gaska's session, something really stood out for me that she said, which was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I know everybody here wants to go far. But we cannot do that without this core connection that we all need. And this is where Chad is going to help us. So he knows what we need, but he also knows what we do. Chad is an entrepreneur. He is the co-founder of We and Me, and his business has enabled him to be a TEDx speaker. He takes what he does around the world, helping other conference audiences, organizations, teams, to really dig deep, to find that connection, to help them fuel the success that they're looking for. But even more important for me, that I want to say for Chad, is he knows what we need, he believes what he does, he's going to do it, but he lives it as well. And Lindsay, and will remember, we had an email from Chad in the build-up to all of this, where he said, at the end of, detailed stuff, what else can I do for both of you to make your life easier? Wow. We had a lot of inbox of material of things that were making our life quite hard. And Chad is that kind of guy. He's going to make life easier today. For all of you, he has already. Chris and Christina are getting a break. Chad is our MC and going to hold this all together for us today. And I am really thrilled to welcome him to the stage, although I know he won't be up here for long, and to introduce you all to Chad Littlefield.
Me olvido mi español cuando llegar en Colombia, so I'm going to need to do the rest of the presentation in English because I forgot my Spanish when I landed in Colombia. Can everybody take your arms and just cross them? So Joe said that I'm going to make life easier for you. I don't know that I fully agree with that. And so what I'd love you to do is, however you're crossing your arms right now, look at what arm is on top and switch arms so the other arm is on top. How's that feel? It feels a little bit strange, right? Something's going on. And I would say what just happened in our brain is we just created a new neural pathway. Like our mind just learned. And so if we every day cross our arms the way that we normally don't, it would eventually become comfortable. And so I'm starting with that as a framing of what we're going to do today, because it's not going to be me up here just speaking at you. What we're going to do today may stretch some of you a little bit outside of where you're comfortable. And my invitation is stretch to the level of your comfort, but don't go beyond that. Choose your own level of challenge as we go. One of the perspectives, before I say anything about myself, one of the contexts that I want to set is that even though I happen to have a microphone right now, and I happen to be standing on the stage, I am not the expert. I am not the expert. My perspective coming in here is that you all are the experts of your own experience. Nobody knows your life, your colleagues, the entrepreneurs you serve, your countries, your states, your provinces better than you do. And so I'm going to spend 0 seconds pretending that I know. And I'm going to, what I'd love to do is to make that experts of your own experience come alive, is flip the stage around so that we are all on the stage rather than just me. And I'll explain how we're going to do that in a moment. But first of all, Joe said the word connection. And Anita's been talking about the importance of connection. And I think at some level, everybody here is bought into the power of connection. What I would rather do, instead of spending my time convincing you of the importance of connection, I'd love to do it. And so I have a question for you, and I'd love to get some quick answers. So when you meet somebody else, another person, for the very first time, what questions do you typically ask? what do you do? What's your name? Where are you from? In this room, it's a wild question to ask. Where are you from? You're like, the entire world is right here. We should call this the Global Youth Entrepreneurship Summit. So we should. So if we're asking, what's interesting, I think, is that in general, and I'm not saying those questions are bad, but in general, we ask the same questions when we meet somebody. And so the question that I want to ask us all is, what if we didn't? What would happen if we met somebody and we didn't ask, where are you from, what do you do, and we asked them something a little bit beyond that, and skip some of the small talk. And so all of you have on your tables have some cards. They look like this. They're probably a little bit smaller. And in a moment, what I'm going to invite us to do, these cards come from a deck of cards called We Connect cards. That I designed originally 6 years ago because a part of my job was inviting people to connect and create cultures of connection, as many of you do in your own programs. And what I noticed was when you invite two people to connect, sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. And if they're teenagers, sometimes it looks a little bit awkward. Or if they're teenagers, sometimes it looks like a group that's hanging out like this. And so I asked myself in that moment a human-centered design question, which is, what could I put in between two people to help that connection, help accelerate that connection? So what we're going to do, before I say anything else about myself, is just have an experience, an experiment, if you will. And so in a moment, what I'm going to invite you to do is choose a card off of your table and stand up and pair up with somebody who you haven't met yet in the room. You're going to ask the question on your card to them. They'll listen to your response, hopefully, and then we're going to listen to their response. And then they'll ask you the question on their card. You'll hopefully be able to hear their response. And after that, and especially with varying levels of English, somebody's going to come up and say, Chad, what do we do next? So after you have that conversation, you're going to swap cards with that partner and just put your hand in the air, signaling that you're looking for somebody else to pair up with. So it'll be the self-facilitating swapping, and my invitation here is as an experiment in connection. Just see what happens. See what happens when you grab a card and ask somebody a question that is bigger than you normally would. Now, one disclaimer. So I bet that most of you in the room are like, great, this is what I came for. I came to connect. I'm ready. And some of you are like, you want me to ask a stranger what is life teaching you right now? Not happening. And so whatever spectrum you fall on, my invitation in this moment is, or my reminder is that we get complete and total choice over how we answer questions. My business partner, Will Wise, and I wrote a book called Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter. Because I think that the questions that we ask shape the conversations we have, and the conversations all added up shape the culture that we're actually in. And that culture has the ability to shift and change the world. And so I think at some level, if you want to change the world, come back here and change your questions. So as an experiment, what we're going to do, again, I'll say directions one more time, is you can go ahead and stand up and pair up with somebody who you haven't met. Ask them the question on your card. They'll exchange, you'll swap cards, and then put your hand in the air, signaling you're looking for a new partner.
So, Chad, can we suggest, so that the Spanish speakers don't only talk to each other that they know, that some of the bilingual staff, instead of participating, walk around and find somebody that might need translation?
And Danny and Zara and our wonderful translators in the back are going to come out. And so if you would like some help with translation, feel free to head toward the back with support.
Very nice to meet you. And I really thought about you, so I thought this will be my chance to grab you. Yes.
Hey, should we pair up? Should we pair up?
Yeah.
Let me get a card.
So,
Hey friends. So if you want
Can I just
a
get this
question,
one? Yep.
what? Yeah, you can take it. If you want a question, feel free, if you're participating virtually, to ask this question via text or phone to somebody else in your life. Call them up and send them a picture or text them this question and ask them what is one of your favorite things about someone in your family. Great. Because
Swap cards, hands up, and somebody else will be looking for a partner. 10 seconds. 10 seconds. 10 segundos. All right. If you can pause your conversations just for a moment. You can pause your conversations. Whoever's chair this is, I will wipe it off before I get off. How are you feeling? Good. Good. Yeah. How many of you came here in part because you were excited about connecting with the other people in this room? Yeah, right? It's one of the reasons that we show up. And yet I think part of what makes an event like this so magical is that I think we live in a world with that's filled with sips of connection, right? We have little sips and tiny little pieces of connection. And I think on the whole, we're craving a gulp of connection, right? We're craving a gulp. It's like if you're on a really hot summer day in Cartagena and you're really, really thirsty, you haven't had water in 3 days, and you finally get back to your room and there's a big ice cold glass of water, condensation on the outside, and you pick it up and you go, and you set it down. It's not very satisfying, right? It's pretty unsatisfying. But it's better than nothing. But if you come over and you have that gulp, you really get a good gulp of water. There's something that's quenching. And I think that connection has the power to create that. So, whatever conversations you just had, what I want to do is add one lens or one layer. So as if I took 100 pairs of glasses and threw them out, my invitation is for you to put on this pair of glasses. The pair of glasses is in my work and research and in the moments where you're trying to cultivate connection and engagement in your own programs, in your own context. I would say that once a question is asked, that a handful of things happens. But one of them is that these turn on, right? These appendages on the side of our heads, these ears turn on, and neurologically, our brains tend to process that information in one of two dominant ways. And so I'm gonna attach some non-neuroscientific language to this, but one is a very default mindset, one is a very deliberate mindset. My wife is very good at reminding me that I'm better at the default mindset and that sometimes I need to pay attention to my own listening. And so the first way, and if you're by a table, feel free to reach down, there's these little red keychain cards, and you're all free to grab one. The first way that we often listen on the white side of the cards, if you don't have one now, it's okay, there's plenty of them around. You will be able to get them. The first way, that's a very default, that actually kind of comes from the part of our brain that develops first when we're growing, is this idea of listening to win. Listening to win. Which is interesting. Let's actually just play with this right now with an example. Where are you from? Colombia. Let me tell you about the time that I went to Cartagena on a trip. Who are we talking about right now? Yeah. But how common? I actually did this just the other day. Who's from Holland? So I did this just the other day where I was listening to when I was so default. You shared that you were from Holland, and the first thing out of my mouth was, "Ooh, I'm going to Holland in a couple months." And so I think the intention might have been positive, right? To say, "Oh, there's a connection here." But in fact, what ended up happening is we ended up talking about me. And so a more deliberate, choiceful way to listen, which has the power to very much transform a conversation, is if you're able to flip your brain from that mindset of listening to win to a mindset of listening to understand, right? And so what would happen if just for one moment you set aside your entire lifetime of ungoogleable experience that you carry around. I don't know how that translates. Carry around this lifetime of ungoogleable experience, and just for a moment you set that aside and you're just looking at the people around you, curious to really get them, really understand them. Because if you can make that connection, I have never met a person on the planet that hasn't at some level had a desire to be seen, heard, and understood. So the lens, the pair of glasses, going back to that, is listening to understand. So we're going to do one more round of this swapping and conversation. This time, just put on the pair of glasses and just try to listen to understand. And I know that English is all over, so I'm glad that you're having all of these experiences figuring out how to say what you want to say. Be intentional about listening to understand, and if you want a trick to just reach inside your brain and turn it from listening to win to listening to understand, my challenge or my invitation to you would be that whenever you ask the question on your card and you hear their response, make sure the next thing that you say, the next sentence that you say, ends in a question mark. So make sure that however you respond, just play with what would happen if the first sentence that I say in response is actually a question rooted in your own natural, genuine curiosity. To just take that conversation one level beyond. Cool? So same mechanics. We're gonna be swapping, and in a handful of minutes, I'll bring us back. Okay? Go for it. can hear my voice, just start waving at me. If you can hear my voice, just start waving at me. If you can hear my voice, just start waving at me. All right, so pause. Woo. So here's the thing. I think in a lot of ways, now half of my job is starting conversations, and the other half is ending them. And so I apologize in advance because there's no good way to end 100 good conversations. But we get to spend a few more days with each other. And so let any conversation that got cut off during this, let that just be an invitation to, you've met them, feel free to go up and skip the small talk and really follow your curiosity. What I'd like to do is a way of bringing us back together before we sit down and I start to bring us home. What I'd like to do is I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to just reflect on your own experience. And I want to leave about 5 to 10 seconds of solid silence for you to think of your own response to that question. And then I want to just pop out a handful of responses. So my question for you is, thinking about the conversations you just ended up in, the experience you just had, both rounds, what struck you? What struck you about that experience? Or what did you notice about that experience? So think about it for 5 to 10 seconds, your own response. What did you notice? And then we'll share a few out. Yeah.
Sudden, unexpected empathy.
Sudden, unexpected empathy. Very cool. What else? What else struck you? Yeah?
When you just met the person, there was a sudden intimacy involved because you asked questions.
Yeah, even though you only met, there was a way that intimacy or that connection was accelerated to some degree, right? You could get to that conversation at some point, but it might just take a while, depending if you start with the questions that we normally start with. Yeah.
Although the questions were deep, because I was hearing where you're from, the answers were so easy to come.
I'll repeat back. Yeah, so the answers were very easy to, even though the questions were big, you found it easy to have answers, right? Because we all have a whole lifetime of experience. Like in our minds, how many textbooks of experience do we carry around that we get to share with people? Yeah, I'll try to. So for the folks that can't hear, I'll try to repeat back so that we can hear. Yeah.
I would just say, the authentic response. So it wasn't the basic, in essence, kind of what you said. It was just authentic. It was genuine. Again, being able to connect all of those things.
Yeah.
But authentic.
Yeah, it was really authentic, really genuine. A couple others. Yeah. It was energizing. Yeah. How many of you feel a little bit, whether you've had coffee, tea, or not? How many of you feel a difference in this room? Yeah. Oh, it changes the room. And so this idea. So actually, why don't we go ahead and have a seat? I will wipe off my chairs.
They have arrived. There's somewhere where it's running. So you can either take them outside or in the break.
So for me, whatever experience you had, even if your conversations were like, yeah, okay, they were all right. Even if that was the case, what I would say, what we just experienced at some level was what I would call connection before content. So often, and many of you are running programs, perhaps running trainings, workshops, you're working with entrepreneurs, either individually or in groups, and so often, or you're giving presentations, and so often it's our default or our normal to start with content before connection. Content. But I would say what I've found traveling around the world, working with organizations to help them amplify and build cultures of connection, what I've found is that if you're able to establish that connection first, an immense amount of impact can get created once you have that foundation and that network of connections. But it's not just my observations. Have any of you heard of a study called Project Aristotle before? Awesome, new information. So Google, a company with 10,000 plus employees around the world, went on this quest to discover and try to find the characteristics of the highest performing teams within Google. And so Google is a company that likes data, right? They like my data, they like your data, they also like their employees' data. And so in gathering all this data, what they found was the number one characteristic of high-performing teams at Google was not the perfect personality match. It wasn't the years of technical experience. The number one characteristic of high-performing teams was the degree of psychological safety in that group. And I think if we take that, and I know that like research-wise, you can't just extrapolate that and share that anywhere or apply that anywhere, but I do think what that basically is PhD term for, can I be myself when I show up? Can I bring my full self? And so you walk over here, innovation for impact. If you want people to share their ideas and to come up with things that haven't been created yet, creating that culture of connection and that level of psychological safety is really, really powerful. So what I'd like to do is share some good news. So I have a gift for you all, and YBI has a gift for you all. So how many, just out of curiosity, how many of you just playing with the cards found them a useful tool to help connect? Cool. So,
where can I get these cards?
What's that?
Where can I get these
Where
cards?
can you get these cards? So, thanks to YBI and the Summit, on behalf of me, you're all going to get a deck. So the deck, I can share. So during the break, after our next panel, during the break, we'll be setting out, and you can go grab a deck. Because you're all getting a deck, let me tell you a little bit about it, because while I created this deck, and it's now, I created it to solve a problem that I saw in my own little world, I never expected that they would start to be used in 80 countries around the world with millions of conversations on a daily basis. So while we were doing this, somewhere else across the world was using these cards to create conversations that allow people to accelerate that connection. And hopefully you will take them and use them in your own context. But a little bit about the deck. In creating it, it wasn't just me sitting at a Google Doc typing out 60 questions. We use Stanford's design thinking model and human-centered design over the course of 2 years to iterate on these questions. So the 60 questions that are in the deck, the colors are actually color-coded. So green cards, I don't know if any of you noticed this, but green cards have questions that tend to be fun and light. Blue cards have questions that are a little bit deeper. And purple cards encourage some level of self-reflection. And we included the purple cards especially because oftentimes an icebreaker or connection favors extroversion. But I think we need to carve out space for those that take some time to think. And so some of these questions you probably had the experience you had never been asked before, and so it took a minute to actually come up with that response. So I'd love to do is to share one beautiful story. My wife's name is Kate, and Kate used to be a labor and delivery nurse. Used to help bring babies into the world, or help moms bring babies into the world. She now works as a nurse in schools. And so these cards, there are lots of ways to use the cards. There's a link on the back with video tutorials that you'll misinterpret and find your own ways to use them. But one way that I think illustrates the power of connection, that Kate leaves a deck of these cards, probably because she's married to me, leaves a deck of these cards sitting on her desk in her office. And her regulars that come in for medication or whatever else, she'll invite them. She's set out the intention for connection in that office. So even though they're coming in for content, right? They're coming in for a thing, she's giving them connection. She's prescribing connection. So they'll choose a card together and they'll both answer a question. But she has this one student who we'll call Simon. And she always knows Simon is coming to her office because she can hear from down the hallway. Because Simon runs to her office every time he comes down, and he gets to her office, He lays down on the ground. Okay, Nurse Kate, I'm ready for my question. And I think it's an extreme, absolutely extreme example of the power of connection. But I think at a deep level, all the people that are in your programs that you interact with, like in this room this year alone, will probably interact with tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, just from the people in this room. And if we're able to create more stories like Simon, where people come running to your programs to get engaged and connected with each other, innovation for impact can start to become not a theme for this week, but a reality for us all in our own programs. Thank you a bunch. I am going to be sticking around for the rest of the day as your MC, and so if you hated this, whenever you see my face, you should leave. If you loved it, stick around, and we'll be continuing to do things that are mix up the day and get us our brains turned on in some capacity. But thanks for your attention, and even more, thanks for your connection.